What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we are talking about summer bass fishing, where these fish go and how to catch them. Summertime bass fishing. I can't believe it's here already. You know, most lakes around the country you're already through. Heck, even the Great Lakes. You know, you guys saw some videos from up there. Those fish are post spawn. A lot of locations, those fish are post spawn. So for the majority, I'm gonna say 99% of the country, your fish are post spawn, starting and probably have already started to get into their summer haunts, their summer pattern, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Where do these fish go after they've completed the spawn and backed out a little bit to kind of recover? And then my best baits, or my favorite techniques, most confidence techniques to put fish in the boat. So summertime, like I said, it's a great time to be out on the water. I love fishing long days. So sometimes putting in the boat in the dark, and sometimes pulling the boat out in dark and just fishing all through the day. And a lot of guys, you know, this time of the year, to beat the heat, they'll fish short hours in the morning, they'll fish short hours in the evening, kind of fish those low light conditions, and that works really well. Those are great times to be out, but know that you can also catch them middle of the day. In fact, it becomes fairly easy to predict those fish locations, especially shallow fish, when you have that sun high up in the sky. You know, it really narrows down those shade pockets, right? The shade lines under the trees, or the shade line on the shoreline, or under or around docks. It really shrinks that area where those fish can congregate, and that really makes it easy and predictable where those fish should be. If there's a fish on that tree, it's most likely in that little itty bitty shade area that shadow is or that sun is casting, right? But with the low light, that shade could be spread 10 or 15 feet, so that fish could be anywhere in there. But we're going to cover a lot of that type of stuff today. You know, like I said, it's a great time to be out on the water. You know, fish have now recovered from the spawn. You know, we've talked about it through this whole transition period. You know, these fish move up shallow to do their spawn. Then they're gonna back out a little bit to recover, give them about a week or two, and then those fish are gonna split, right? Some fish are gonna stay shallow, some fish are gonna go deep, and depending on your type of fishery, depending on your water clarity, depending on what your fishery provides shallow, will kind of determine where the majority of those fish go, right? And in previous videos, we've always said, you know, let's just split it up 50-50, right? But I don't know what the actual percentage is. I know what I like to catch. I like to catch those aggressive fish. The water's warm, it's not hot, right? Don't get it confused with hot yet. So you're not dealing with like low dissolved oxygen levels, right? Where those fish are just really lethargic and dealing with that hot water. It's just got really comfortable for them. They've done their spawn, and they are looking to eat, right? They're looking to feed up. So it is a great time to be out on the water chucking and winding. So I like to catch them fast, but sometimes this time of the year, during the dog days of summer, you might have to slow down and throw a worm. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of my favorite moving baits, some of my favorite finesse baits. But like I said, depending on your fishery, depending on the water clarity, what are these fish, which structure are these gonna fish pull to? Are they gonna go out deep and pull off to your ledges, your current breaks, your offshore rock piles? Or are they gonna pull up shallow in that thick, nasty, green grass, right? I shouldn't say nasty, but that thick, healthy green grass. Are you flipping and pitching and punching, throwing a frog, working a fluke, or are you offshore chucking and winding a crankbait or a wobblehead? So let's talk about the different types of fisheries, because that really determines where these fish are going, right? The fish in a pond or a natural lake, more of a featureless lake, they're gonna have a lot less things to go or pull off to than say a highland reservoir where you're dealing with long river arms and main lake points and offshore rock piles and breaks and bridge pilings and all that good stuff, right? So understanding your fishery and where these fish are most likely going or have already went to, you guys, once you figure out this pattern, the cool thing about this time of the year is once you dial in these fish, you figure out where they are there all summer and basically through the fall, right until we start that fall transition. But for the next several months, these fish are gonna be in those same locations. But if you're not paying attention and you lose these fish, it can take you a little while to kind of figure out, heck, they were in 2 feet of water doing their spawn. Where are all these fish in my lake now? So let's talk about, back up a little bit. You guys know that we love doing these seasonal transition videos. Every year they're applicable, right? You know, we'll add some different baits or we'll add some different techniques that we may have gained confidence in the previous season or whatever. But these seasonal transition videos, man, they're like clockwork because these fish move. They don't stay in the same location all the time. Even if you're on a small pond, right? You're gonna have the dam, you're gonna have the deeper area, then you're gonna have the shallow area that has more of the grass and more of your stuff that those fish are gonna pull to during the spawn. Then some of those fish, if the water gets too hot, they're gonna pull back out and go deeper, or they might stay in that grass. But those fish are gonna move all over the place. They're not always in one spot. And that's just that's just talking pond fishing. You know, you talk like a highland reservoir like we talked about just a second ago. You know, the main difference between a highland reservoir and a lowland reservoir, if you guys are new to the channel or haven't seen these types of videos before, for the rest of you guys, this is all gonna be a refresher. It would be good too. But a highland reservoir, typically you're gonna have a narrow dam, but it's gonna be really tall. So it's gonna be a dam that is basically damming up some kind of river. You know, so you're gonna have those long river arms. You might have multiple arms. Within those arms, those big river arms, you're gonna have lots of fingers, and you're gonna have lots of main lake points and secondary points, and they're gonna be lots of bluff walls. And then on the flip side, your lowland reservoirs, sometimes those dams can be over a mile wide. They're long, they're typically shorter because they're not really damming up a river, right? They're mainly damming up kind of a flatter area. You're not gonna have as many steep breakoffs and ledges and contours. Sometimes you will actually have multiple dams around to dam up that lake. So on those types of lakes, you're not gonna have those real long river arms. You might have some arms and stuff. You're gonna have some secondary points. You're gonna have some secondary points. You're gonna have some bays, you know, some offshore humps. You might have some creek channels out there. So there's gonna be a lot less abrupt breaks. And those fish, we'll talk about where those fish go to. And then, you know, what else we have? We have river systems, right? We have systems that are completely like here, Chickamauga, Tennessee River, you know, Kentucky Lake, Gunnersville, Chickamauga, Watts Bar. You have all these world-renowned fisheries that are all like a river system. Yeah, you can get back in some of these arms, right? Some of these backwaters are vast. They fish just like their own little separate lake, but it's still all current driven, right? You have these dams just pushing and pumping a ton of water. You get a ton of current, a lot of movement, and those fish this time of the year with that warmer water, these fish they don't mind to be out in that current. So we're going to talk about that. And then what else? We talked about ponds a little bit. I'm going to put ponds and natural lakes kind of in the same kind of category, right? Kind of featureless. You might have a little bit riprap dam. You know, thinking about Clear Lake back out on the West Coast, Northern California, you're gonna have some offshore rock piles, you know, have some isolated rock piles. Once you find those are gold, right? Those fish are gonna pull to those. Might have some steep bluffs if you have some mountainous terrain nearby, but for the most part, you know, there's not a lot out there in the north end of Clear Lake, right? It's kind of a big bowl, you know, not a lot of features, but you will find a little bit of creek channels. Same thing with a pond, right? Talked about it a little bit. You might have a big pond, little pond, big pond, but a lot of ponds, especially like park ponds and golf course ponds, they're fairly featureless. But if you find, you know, maybe some ponds have like a beaver or something where they've dropped trees into the water, or you have a shallow area where there's a grass point. Maybe you even have some pads, right? Some lily pads. You might have all sorts of stuff that those fish are gonna pull to. You know, wintertime they're going deep, they're gonna stay in that deeper water. This time of the year, you're gonna have to kind of find them either in that shallow stuff, if you have those laydowns, those brush piles in that stuff, or check the deep stuff. So highland reservoirs, kind of breeze through the different features of the different types of bodies of water. But for a highland reservoir, you know, typically you're dealing with deeper, clearer water. Now, what I've found this time of the year, especially with area like, you know, Northern California, a lot of times that water really fluctuates, especially when you have a long winter, you have a lot of snowpack. You have a lot of that snow melting in the Sierras coming down and filling up those lakes, and then maybe they drop, right? All depends on the water level, but typically you have clear water. You got a lot of visibility. Some fisheries will have a lot of stuff in the water. Sometimes with that water up all the way, you're gonna have big overhangs. I like to fish shallow, throwing top water. I like throwing moving baits. I like to cover water and find those active fish. Maybe they're up under laydowns. If you don't have that type of highland reservoir, maybe you kind of have a rocky shoreline or whatever, to me that's going to be more of an offshore deal, right? Those fish are going to be pulling out main lake points, secondary points. They're going to be on that isolated cover, that structure, rock piles, chunk rock, that sort of stuff. And not only are those fish going to be down on bottom, but they're also going to be up middle column, right? Middle of the water column. It's really important, especially on highland reservoirs or any fishery that has clearer water for that matter. When you can see bottom in 12, 15, 20 feet, it's really important to visibly see that color line, right? That dark area where you can see bottom, and then boom, that dark line where you can't see bottom anymore, where that light's not penetrating and getting down to the bottom. That is the color line. It's really important in all clear water fisheries to use that line, that color line as, I mean, for lack of better structure also, right? They're gonna hunt along that color line. The water's not penetrating all the way down the bottom. They can use that to ambush, but they might not, I mean, they might not be on the bottom in 20 foot. They might be up 10 foot on that color line, and you can throw a topwater out, you know, say it's 50 foot. I know this time of the year out on those big highland reservoirs like Shasta, Oroville, you West Coast guys, you know what I'm talking about. You could be throwing topwater over 150 feet of water, but those fish are only 15 feet down, right? So you can pull up to a way offshore to a main lake point. And I tell you guys, you know, fish your way in, shut that big motor off, creep in, and don't be afraid to throw topwater or swim baits or stuff over that deeper water, because just like I said, that clearer water, they're going to use that color line however deep or however far down that light refracts or gets through that down through the water column. Wherever that light starts stopping, those fish are going to sit there. So that might be 15 feet over 100 foot, it might be 10 foot over 100 foot, it might be 30 feet, but those fish will come up for a swim bait, a glide bait, a topwater. So it is a fun time of year to fish. But if you're in a clear water fishery, don't forget to use that color line as an area to fish. So shallow fishing, you know, you might find some bays with some laydowns. You might even find some isolated pieces of grass. You know, from my experience fishing highland reservoirs, for the most part, the points and secondary points are fairly abrupt, so you don't get a lot of vegetation growing on that. But in some of the back of the bays, you might find a shallow bay that has a lot of grass. So those fish are going to pull into that grass, look for that green, healthy grass, and those fish will be in there as well. Now, if you have a waypoint from the winter time when there was no grass at all, and maybe there was a rock pile in that shallow bay, or maybe there's a sunk boat or whatever hard cover is in that bay, those fish will pull to that. And not only the fish, but the biggest fish will pull to that best spot. Okay, highland reservoirs, kind of covered that. Lowland reservoirs, water clarity, all that stuff applies as well, right? This time of the year on those lowland reservoirs, I'm going offshore. If I'm going offshore, I'm looking for those high, the tops of the humps. So you might have a lake that, you know, is, you know, 80 to 150 feet deep or whatever, but you might have a hump that comes up to 25 foot, right? I'm chucking a big topwater over it, or I'm throwing a swim bait. You know, I might have to, after I fish it with the big baits, I might have to go and throw a shaky head or a wobble head or some kind of crankbait, but I'm throwing reaction first, because again, these fish are active and they're feeding. So offshore, I'm looking for those humps, those island tops. I'm looking for high spots that have break-offs to deeper water where those fish can move in and out. They don't necessarily have to move up and down, right? They're not going from 60 foot to 20 foot. They might be going, you know, 5 foot to 15 foot, right? In and out. They're not moving up and down a ton. They're moving in and out. That's where that color line comes into play for you guys as well. And then just like the highland reservoir, lowland reservoirs, you're gonna have a lot more, less contour, right? So you have a lot more shallow bays or flatter bays. So topwater, frog, grass, fluke, all that good stuff comes into play as well. And just like those highland reservoirs, if you have good hard structure, those fish are gonna pull to those spots as well. You know, and then, you know, we always do these seasonal transition videos, but we'll talk about fall, and as that grass starts dying, how those fish are going to pull to the remaining healthy grass. We'll talk about that here in a couple months, but let's talk about, kind of talked about ponds briefly. You know, river systems. I don't even know, 50-50, whatever, maybe 70-30. Shallow fish to deep fish. You guys out here on the Tennessee River, river systems, you guys know it's ledge fishing time, right? Fish, the spawn is over, the post-spawn kind of funk, that transition is over. Now they're out there on the ledges. It's not uncommon to pull up to a spot. You know, when I say ledge, I'm talking about the break to the main river channel, right? Maybe you have a big backwater, and then you kind of have a flat, and then you have that break where the main river channel swings. That ledge, when those fish pull up on that ledge and they're up there to eat, it is not uncommon to have, you know, 100 fish days or catch 10 or 15, 20 fish in an hour. Those fish congregate, they school up, and especially here on that Tennessee River, you know, you find those spots with those big schools of fish, you can get well in a hurry and have one of those magical days. So ledge fish, we're talking crankbaits and flutter spoons and jigs and wobble heads, you know, all the reaction stuff. And then you can talk about shaky heads and Carolina rigs and stuff. Matt's got a video here coming up shortly, top 5 baits for July. He's gonna go more in depth for baits. I'm just gonna cover kind of techniques and kind of where these fish are going. But I will give you, at the end of this video, I will give you some of my favorites. And then for those shallow fish, heck, I'm sitting here in like 3.5 foot, right? I got a whole lily pad field here, you know, frog, fluke, weedless underspin, you know, flashy swim or something like that, a walking bait, topwater bait. It's power fishing shallow, power fishing deep, and then if we have to, then we can go finesse. But those shallow fish, again, I'm up there throwing a topwater, a popper, something that I can make real accurate casts to, you know, that little shade pocket, right? I don't have to work it fast. I can let it sit there, bloop, bloop. You know, those fish are gonna come up and eat it. A frog, right? Topwater time. Buzz baits, if you're a guy that likes chucking and whining and just covering a ton of water, buzz baits, whopper ploppers work great. Even some of those, you know, the Teckle, the sprinkler frog, you know, some of those frogs have moving tails, so you cast them out and wind them, and they blop, 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 just like a weedless whopper plopper or horny toad, something like that. But it's totally, I mean, the tackle box is completely open, and that is what is so cool. You can catch them however you want to try to catch them, right? Everything is in the playbook. Worms, out deep, hair jigs, flutter spoons, topwaters. I mean, these fish are active. All right, so back to the river systems. You know, ledge fishing, those fish are pulling out. You got those fish out there on the breaks. The shallow fish, you got them back in the grass. You got them back in the shallow stuff. So you're throwing a frog, you might be punching or flipping around isolated pieces of cover, but that's where those fish are going. Find that healthy grass, find the good ledge, and you will find a ton of bass. One other thing I want to talk about, I often overlook it in these videos when I'm talking to you guys, marinas. You know, they really come into play. It doesn't matter if you're out on, you know, Shasta or Oroville, like I talked about, in the Highland Reservoir or a Lowland Reservoir out west, or you're out here on Chickamauga, right? Most of these bigger bodies of water have marinas. Obviously, a lot of these fisheries have docks, right? We got shallow docks, we got deeper docks. Clear Lake, you got shallow docks, deeper docks. Typically, the deeper docks are fished better this time of the year. We got docks, but more importantly, we got marinas. Do not overlook fish in the marinas because they can be loaded with fish. Just a big platform, lots of shade, lots of bait fish and panfish, the bluegill, they all show up, and all those big hungry bass love to eat, you know, the bait fish, the shad, the bluegill, all that sort of stuff. So do not, if you have a marina on your fishery, don't overlook fishing the marinas. One of my favorite baits to fish a marina or docks this time of the year is actually a Senko, right? A Senko, something that I can skip under there, or maybe I'm going through a row of marina docks on the marina. I can skip in between the boats, you know, right? If I'm pulling up to a marina, I'm paralleling those boats. As I come through, I'm looking down that boat slip. Typically there's a rope or something connecting, holding that boat on both sides. I'll skip that Senko all the way up to the main walkway, and I'm gonna let that thing just fall on semi-tight line. I'm watching my line. I'm either gonna see it flick and jump, or I'm gonna feel the dunk, reel down and set. You know, those fish are just suspended there, maybe 5 foot down below that dock and just sitting there. A lot of shade, a lot of things to eat, but a Senko is a great bait to fish those big marina docks. But I didn't want to fit, I feel like I've forgot that or left that stuff out in previous videos. But if you have big sets of docks like that, don't be afraid to fish them this time of the year. All right, so now that we talked about the different types of fisheries, we kind of talked about where those fish are going. I'm gonna give you guys just some categories of baits to talk about. Down below in the video description, or to think about, down below in the video description, I will link some of my favorites and favorite colors. And if it requires terminal tackle, I'll link that stuff too. But in my mind, like I said, I'm starting off power fishing. You know, I think summertime fishing, I'm thinking crankbaits, I'm thinking topwaters, you know, but I'm still thinking moving baits, underspin, swim baits, a frog, a fluke. Even if I have to go weedless, I'm going with like some kind of you know, swinging head jig, right? Wobble head. And then if I have to slow down, that's what I'm going with, like a shaky head or the Senko. But if you're a guy, Highland Lowland Reservoir or river system, and you're out in the deeper water, it's time to start thinking about the deep crank. The Rapala, the DT20, the Strike King, the 6XD, our tactile DD crank, you know, something that gets down to that 15 to 20 foot range. And you're throwing this on a 7-to-1 or an 8-to-1 gear ratio reel. These fish are active, right? So you're chucking this thing, you're burn, pause. You hit that piece of isolated structure. Maybe it's a little bit of chunk rock or whatever it may be, or maybe it's a whole rock pile you're fishing. You're just down there grinding, grind, pause, grind, pause, and these fish are gonna come unglued. So I'm always thinking this time of the year for those deeper fish, that 15 to 20 foot range, I'm thinking about a crankbait. As far as colors, I'm keeping it like your shad patterns, and then I'm going with my chartreuses, my chartreuse black back, something with high visibility. A lot of times this time of the year, you start getting that warmer water, you start getting algae blooms, so you want some kind of visible. So I'm going natural, realistic with some flash, and then I'm going with those chartreuses or those brighter colors. Sticking with the deeper fish that apply to all the different categories, like I said, I'm going with the wobblehead. Some kind of creature bait with a lot of swimming action. This is actually the X Zone, that's the adrenaline craw. The speed craw works great, but I'm going with June bug color. This is an awesome summertime bait. You chuck it out there and you fish it just like you would your crankbait. You let this thing hit bottom and you're just grinding bottom, and it bump, and it's those paddle tails are back there kicking, and big fish eat this. The bonus thing, the plus side of throwing this guy over the crank is it's weedless. So you can fish this in a lot of areas you can't fish the crankbait, but that thing gets bit all summer long. And then sticking with the deep fish, if I have to slow down and I'm fishing a brush pile or a rock pile or whatever, that's when I'm switching over and throwing some kind of worm. Typically a shaky head. I got real good bottom contact. Again, throwing that June bug color, whether it's June bug or Bama bug. The T-Mac is a great worm. That X Zone, that Deception worm's a great worm. But yeah, the net bait, that T-Mac is an awesome shaky head worm. Typically throwing like a 1/4 ounce head, something that I can cast a longer way, you know, a longer distance, and I have real good feel. If I do have to go up, I can go to a heavier, you know, 3/8 or 1/2 ounce head. But for the most part, that's what I'm slowing down with, because it is weedless, but big fish eat that as well. One of the baits that kind of plays in between, whether it's shallow and you're throwing like an owner flashy swimmer with an X Zone swammer or a Kitech, or you're fishing a little deeper, you're fishing offshore, you're fishing that color line, and you have an exposed hook, I'm going with some kind of underspin, some kind of swim bait with some flash to it. Something that has some flash, some vibration. Again, these fish are active, they're feeding up, so this is a great time to have some kind of underspin tied on. Again, I'll link all this stuff down below in the video description. If you're up shallow in the grass, having that owner, that flashy swimmer, it's weedless, works really well. If you can get away with that exposed hook, obviously our little underspin is an awesome bait. That's a 3/8 ounce head. So there's a lot of things you can do with that bait as well. Let's switch shallow. You shallow fishermen, you know, I'm not gonna really talk about the punching stuff, really the real heavy cover, but obviously you can put a 1 ounce, ounce and a half tungsten on and really punch through that thick vegetation. But I'm thinking like flashy swimmer, swim bait, weedless. I'm thinking a fluke. This thing works really well. A whiplash shad, you know, something, a soft plastic jerk bait, right? That thing works great. Something you can throw through these pads. You can work it real fast like Topwater, and then you can slow it down, let it fall, and rip, get that thing all erratic and aggressive. But this thing works really well this time of the year as well. And like I said earlier, guys, for the most part, you know, as it gets hot and you're in your fishery, you know, those low light hours, either in the morning or in the evening, they are great. But like I said earlier, with that sun up high, and it really shrinks those shade lines, Some of my best fishing in the summer comes at the hottest hours when that sun is up high, and you know, big wake bait fish and big frog fish. It really helps narrow down and congregate those fish to the smaller shade pockets. So don't be afraid. You make sure you get yourself some good, you know, clothing that kind of wicks away water, has some built-in sunscreen, some you know, kind of helps with keeping your core cool. Now let's talk shallow. If you can get away with it, we're talking poppers, right? Again, as that sun's high, you got those little shade pockets. Throwing a popper, something you can throw out there, make a little bit of commotion or a lot of commotion, but you leave it in that strike zone a lot longer than if you were throwing like a buzz bait or a quicker moving bait. A popper, a walking bait. Again, this time of the year, if I am on a highland reservoir and I am out deeper, but I'm fishing that color line, I might be throwing a a shower blows or a vixen, or a spook walking style bait along that color line. A whopper plopper, more of a ghosty color whopper plopper, you know, something that they can see the commotion, but they'll come up and get. So don't be afraid to throw your topwaters offshore. But if we're going shallow and we're going into a vegetation, then it's all about the frog. Whether it's a popping frog or a good walking frog, you know, something with a good flat herb belly to walk across the grass or walk across the cheese. If you're gonna fish a little bit less dense grass or vegetation, you can get a frog like the river sea, the bullywall. It has a real good keel on it. This is the snag proof. You can see that's a little bit flatter, but the bullywall has a real good keel, so it walks really well. The Spro's a really good frog. But whether you're doing a popping frog or you're doing a walking frog in heavy vegetation or less dense vegetation, a frog is on the menu as well. But guys, those are some of my favorite techniques. This time of the year, it's a great time to be out on the water. Wear some proper clothing, you know, make sure you cover yourself up, and wear some sunscreen, or at least some clothing that will protect you. Have lots of water in the boat. But if you can get past the heat of the day, you can have some of the best fishing of the entire summer, right? It is time to be out. Whether you're fishing shallow or fishing deep, be out there and put some bass in the boat or the kayak or the bank, whatever you're fishing from, but make sure you're out there fishing this time of the year. Guys, like every video, down below in the video description, I'll link all of these different techniques that I talked about, and then my favorite baits in those categories, those techniques, as well as favorite colors and all that good stuff. But as always, guys, hopefully this video gives you some confidence or kind of points you in the right direction for that post-spawn kind of transition through summer, where these fish are going. Down below in the comment section, if you have any questions, please leave those down below there. We'll try to get those as soon as possible. But as always, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for the support. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys on the next video.